Loyola University basketball coach Cheryl Swoopes, she's under investigation, accused of mistreating players. One of them is speaking out this morning, telling us why she wanted to transfer. ABC's Lindsay Davis is here with the details. Good morning, Lindsay.
Good morning, Lara. Cheryl Swoopes was the first woman to ever sign with the WNBA. But this morning, the college coach is not only under fire, but under investigation after reports that the majority of her roster has decided to leave.
There's a lot of other shit going on that players are like, this ain't where I want to be.
Over there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some new shit going
it's
on around there.
It's a lot. So you have players that are very significant on this Indiana Fever team that are like, I don't
want to be here.
This is where I want to be.
Yeah. Now listen.
The WNBA is entering a new era, and its landscape has shifted dramatically, all thanks to one undeniable force, Caitlyn Clark. At a time when the Indiana Fever were considered an afterthought, a team without significant appeal or playoff potential, Caitlyn Clark came along and changed everything. Imagine the surprise when this rookie, fresh off of dominating college basketball, walked into a league that had been dominated by established stars and veteran players and immediately started making waves. But it wasn't just her play on the court that caused ripples. No, Caitlyn Clark's mere presence turned the entire narrative about the Indiana Fever upside down. This was a franchise no one thought could attract big names. And yet, under the guidance of Clark, it has not only become relevant, but has now positioned itself as a future powerhouse. But then there's Cheryl Swoopes, one of the WNBA's most iconic players. She had a very different view. As a respected veteran with a long history of success, Swoopes seemed confident in her analysis of Clark's potential and Indiana's future. She doubted that Indiana could ever become a contender in the league, writing off the team and their chances of pulling in top-tier talent. She doubted that Caitlyn Clark could live up to the hype, and she most certainly didn't believe that the Fever could transform into the juggernaut they are today. That as the season progressed, it became impossible to ignore the seismic shift happening in the league. And now, as Caitlyn Clark continues to light up the WNBA, Cheryl Swoopes has strangely gone quiet. Where are the bold predictions now? What happened to the woman who thought she knew it all? This story isn't just about basketball. It's about how one player can single-handedly change the course of a franchise and leave even the legends questioning their assumptions. So, let's dive in and take a closer look at how Caitlyn Clark and the Fever have turned the WNBA upside down. Cheryl Swoopes was, and still is, a cornerstone of the WNBA. She wasn't just a player, she was a trailblazer. She was the first woman to sign with the WNBA, and her career was nothing short of legendary. 3 championships, multiple MVP awards, and numerous All-Star appearances later, Swoopes had earned the respect of her peers and the admiration of fans around the world. She had seen it all. She knew the grind, the sacrifice, and the effort it took to succeed in a league that was still growing. She wasn't just another player on the court. She was one of the faces of the league, and when she spoke, people listened. But Caitlyn Clark's arrival created a tension Swoopes wasn't ready for. With the rise of Clark, the narrative surrounding the league began to shift. Caitlyn Clark was being touted as the next big thing, an exceptional talent with the ability to revolutionize the game. Yet, Swoopes seemed unprepared to embrace this new wave. She believed that Clark, like many college players before her, would face growing pains in the transition to the pros. Swoopes, having played at the highest level, understood that the WNBA is a different beast than college basketball. She assumed Clark would struggle with the physicality, the competition, and the intensity of the professional game. However, Swoopes' stance wasn't just about Clark's potential. It extended to her thoughts on the Indiana Fever. At the time, the Fever were far from a title contender. They were a team that struggled with consistency and had a roster that lacked the star power to make a real impact. Swoopes was vocal in her belief that no elite player would want to sign with the Fever, dismissing the franchise's chances of attracting high-profile free agents. This was a bold statement to make, especially considering the Fever were one of the few teams with the resources and potential to make significant moves. Yet, Cheryl Swoopes was convinced that the Fever were a dead zone. She believed that Indiana could never attract top-tier talent or build a competitive team around any one player, including Caitlyn Clark. But time would prove Swoopes wrong, and that's where the story truly begins. Caitlyn Clark didn't just enter the WNBA, she exploded onto the scene. Unlike many rookies who take their time to adjust to the pace and pressure of the professional game, Clark was immediately in the spotlight. Within just a few games, she had already made her presence known, not just with her scoring, but with her ability to control the floor, distribute the ball, and lead the team in ways that most rookies can only dream of. Clark had an air of confidence about her that was contagious, and it didn't take long for everyone, from her teammates to fans to analysts, to recognize that she wasn't just another promising player. She was something special. Clark's playmaking ability was one of the first things that caught everyone's attention. She could pass the ball in ways that had the crowd buzzing, her court vision second to none. But it was her scoring that truly made her stand out. Whether it was pulling up from deep behind the arc or driving the lane with relentless determination, Clark had an arsenal of weapons that made defending her a nightmare. And while her stats were eye-popping, it wasn't just about the numbers, it was the way she carried herself. Clark played with the poise of someone who had been in the league for years, not someone who was still learning the ropes. But Clark's effect on the WNBA wasn't limited to her play on the court. Her mere presence shifted the entire energy of the league. Media outlets, who had largely ignored the Fever for years, began to cover them with a new level of interest. Fans started tuning in to watch Indiana's games, eager to see what Clark would do next. And most notably, other players started paying attention. The Fever weren't just a middle-of-the-pack team anymore. They were a team that now had a rising star who could compete with anyone. Suddenly, players who had once overlooked Indiana were starting to consider the possibility of joining the Fever, because Caitlyn Clark wasn't just the future of the team, she was the future of the entire WNBA. As Caitlyn Clark continued to shine, the Indiana Fever's front office recognized that they had an opportunity to build a true contender. They saw the shift in the league and knew they had to act fast. They couldn't just rely on Clark to carry the load on her own. If they wanted to turn the Fever into a legitimate title contender, they needed to surround her with a supporting cast that could complement her abilities. And that's exactly what they did. First, they brought in Natasha Howard, a three-time WNBA champion and one of the most dominant defenders in the league. Howard's presence immediately made the Fever's defense more formidable. She could guard virtually any position on the floor and had a knack for altering shots and controlling the boards. Howard's defensive skills gave the Fever the anchor they needed to contend with the top teams in the league. Next, the Fever signed Diana Bonner, a scoring machine who could light up the scoreboard from anywhere on the court. Bonner had a reputation for being one of the most dangerous players in the WNBA, and her leadership qualities were undeniable. She wasn't just a scorer, she was a player who could bring a team together, lead by example, and perform in clutch situations. Bonner was exactly what the Fever needed to make a serious run at the playoffs. But the Fever didn't stop there. They also brought in Sophie Cunningham, a player with the grit and intensity to elevate the team's energy. Cunningham wasn't afraid to talk trash or make big plays when the team needed it most. Her ability to shoot the three and lock down defenders gave the Fever a well-rounded attack that made them dangerous on both ends of the court. And finally, Sydney Colson, a seasoned veteran with championship experience, joined the team to provide leadership and stability in the backcourt. With Colson running the point, the Fever now had a true floor general who could keep things under control and make sure everyone was in the right position at the right time. These strategic acquisitions didn't just improve the Fever's roster, they completely transformed it. The team went from a struggling, middle-of-the-road squad to one of the most well-rounded and dangerous teams in the league. With Natasha Howard anchoring the defense, Diana Bonner leading the offense, Sophie Cunningham bringing fire and intensity, and Sydney Colson keeping everything in line, the Fever had built a team that could compete with the best of them. What made this roster so dangerous wasn't just the talent, it was the chemistry. The Fever didn't just add players who could put up big numbers, they added players who fit seamlessly into the team's culture and playing style. Howard's defensive toughness complemented Cunningham's fearless attitude. Bonner's scoring ability meshed perfectly with Clark's playmaking, and Colson's leadership brought everything together. Together, they created a roster that was greater than the sum of its parts. And it wasn't just about competing in the regular season, it was about building a team that could thrive in the postseason. The Fever's acquisitions weren't just about adding talent, they were about adding experience, leadership, and a winning mentality. This was a team that could go all the way, and everyone in the league took notice. Caitlyn Clark's role in this transformation cannot be overstated. She isn't just a player on the team, she's the heart and soul of the Fever's resurgence. Her competitive fire, leadership, and unrelenting desire to win have set the tone for the entire franchise. When Clark steps onto the court, she exudes an aura of confidence that spreads throughout the team. Her belief in herself and her teammates has become contagious, and it has inspired those around her to elevate their own games. But Clark's influence extends far beyond the court. She has become the face of the franchise and the face of a new generation of WNBA players. Her ability to connect with fans, her exciting style of play, and her leadership qualities have made her a magnet for attention. And that's exactly what the Fever needed. A player who could draw the eyes of the league and make others want to join the movement she was starting. Caitlyn Clark didn't just change the Fever, she changed the entire culture of the WNBA. As Caitlyn Clark continued to dominate the WNBA and the Fever's rise to prominence accelerated, Cheryl Swoopes, who had once been so vocal in her criticism, went completely silent. When the analysts and commentators were praising Clark for her remarkable season, Swoopes sat quietly. There was no acknowledgement, no apology for her earlier doubts. It became glaringly obvious that Swoopes had misread the situation completely. The league was no longer dominated by the old guard. It was being reshaped by new stars like Clark. Swoopes' absence from broadcasts became even more noticeable. At a critical game between Indiana and Dallas, Swoopes, who had once been a fixture in the WNBA's media coverage, was nowhere to be found. The silence was deafening. Was it a coincidence? Maybe, but considering how vocal she had been in her predictions, her sudden disappearance seemed like a reluctant admission that she had been wrong. Swoopes had underestimated the Fever's potential and dismissed Clark's rise, and now, with every game that passed, it was becoming harder for her to maintain that narrative. Caitlyn Clark didn't just enter the WNBA, she started a revolution. She didn't follow the traditional path of a rookie, waiting her turn, proving herself in small increments, and earning respect over time. No, Clark did the unthinkable. She commanded respect from the moment she stepped on the court. Her rise wasn't gradual, it was immediate and unrelenting. What Clark represents for the WNBA is a complete shift in the status quo. She's a player who doesn't need to wait her turn. She doesn't need permission to be great. She's rewriting the rules of what it means to be a rookie, and in doing so, she's forcing the league to recognize a new standard. Clark's arrival isn't just a personal success. It's a victory for every young player who dreams of entering the league and making an impact. She's proven that you don't have to follow the old hierarchy to succeed. You can disrupt the system, rewrite the narrative, and create a path all your own. And that's exactly what Caitlyn Clark has done. Her rise to stardom is a beacon for the future of the WNBA. She's brought a new level of attention to the league, and with it, new opportunities for players and teams alike. Caitlyn Clark is leading a revolution, and the WNBA will never be the same. As Caitlyn Clark continues to take the WNBA by storm, the Indiana Fever's transformation from an overlooked franchise to a legitimate contender is nothing short of incredible. What was once thought to be impossible, a team that no top-tier player would ever want to join, has now become the most talked-about squad in the league. And none of this would be possible without Caitlyn Clark. She's not just a game changer, she's a cultural force, one who is redefining what it means to be a superstar in the WNBA. So, what do you think? Has Caitlyn Clark reshaped the future of the WNBA? Is the Indiana Fever on its way to becoming the next dynasty in the league? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and let's talk about the future of women's basketball. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another update on the WNBA. This is just the beginning, and Caitlyn Clark's journey has only just started.